Okay, cool. So the zoo inventory function. So let me just say, do you guys know what arrow functions are? Okay, cool. So you could say like const zoo inventory, right? Equals this. Anyone confused by this? Just writing a function as an arrow function. Cool, right? Okay. So basically, what this function is going to take in is an array of arrays, right? So we can say that this is nested arrays, right? That will be the parameter. That is what we will always be passing into this function. Array of arrays.
When would you use an arrow function over?
You can worry about that later. This is just quicker to write from in personally. When you guys learn about something called this, like there's a keyword called this. When you guys learn about that, that's pretty much what arrow functions are for. Okay. But like, don't worry about it for now.
Okay.
If anything, I recommend not using. Or whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah. So it's always going to be taking an array of array, and you always know in this particular problem, you always know what is going to be at each index, right? Index 0 is going to be the name, right? Let me see if I can. Like this is an example, right? So at index 0 of each of these inner arrays, it's always going to be the name of some kind of animal, right? And at index 1, it's always going to be another array. And there will always be two things inside of it. So you know what everything is, right? The name and then an array. And inside that array, you even know what everything is going to be. You know that this is going to be the type of animal, and you know that this is going to be its age at index 0 and 1 respectively. Does everyone agree on that? Cool. So, you can, well, and then what do you have to do? You have to return like an overall sentence, right? Of like all of them together. So, or an array of all the sentences together. Oh, okay, cool. So we say let sentence equal an array, right? And then we can pull out, no. Yeah, so we do a for loop because we have to loop through it, right? Singular. Right? So now, if you guys want to, we can say let animal equal. So what is going to be the animal? And when we're looping through this array, what will always be? How are we going to pull out the animal at each array?
Nested array of I.
Right, nested array of I. Cool. And while we're at it, we can pull out the species and the age as well. So how are we going to do that? What is species going to be if we know the order of everything? How do you pull out something just like we did here with bracket notation of a nested array, a specific index at a nested array? How do you do that? Two brackets. You just need two brackets. That's all you need. So you have, oh well, actually, but not in the nested array, because the nested array is this entire thing, right? So the nested array is this one array. Oh, I mean, not the nest. This is confusing. Hold on. So like nested array at I is an actual array, right? Wait a second. What? Oh, all right. So this is the entire animal, right? We need the name too. That's why I got really confused for a second. So the name will be animal at 0. And that's always going to be the case, right? And the species, like we said before, is going to be 2 brackets. It's going to be animal at 1 because it's the first index, so the second element. It's going to be animal at 1 at 0, just like this. This is how you pull out this. Well, this right here. Because you look into animal is this entire array, right? Name is animal at 0, the 0th index, and then animal at the first index is this other array, and then at the 0th index is this gorilla. So that's how you get the species, and the name is the same exact thing, except we got at index 1, because at 0 gives us gorilla, at index 1 gives us 42. Is anyone confused by that? Does anyone not understand how we are pulling those things out of the nested array? Maybe? Okay. So now that we have all these things, we can just say let sentence equal. Do you guys know about like backticks and like, yeah, okay. So you could just do like an interpolated string. I think that's the word for it, interpolation or whatever. So name space the space species space is space this thing again age. And then at the end of that, we're going to want to push that. Oh, we'll say a new sentence. We're going to want to push that. So sentence dot push new sentence. Where? Oh, there is? Oh. Did that mess with a lot of people? The period? I feel like that would mess with me. And then at the end, you could just return sentence. So we can console, I think, so we could console.log at the end here. Zoo inventory of my zoo. And then we'll set that equal to this thing. So this should be equal to the answer, right? Gosh. Oh, it's not? Console. Is that not the same thing? King Kong the gorilla is 42. Nemo the fish is 5. There's 11. Am I missing something? Oh, no. That's my bad. So this is a classic mistake on my part that you guys don't know about. So like if you do, wow, I completely forgot. So if you do like an array, so if I do like console.log, if you do console.log of like an array of 1, 2, 3 is equal to an array of 1, 2, 3, that is false. Yeah, you guys are going to learn about that, I think, in like two lectures. But That's my bad. But like you could see that what we got before is the correct answer. So is everybody good on this? Does anybody have any questions about how we got those things out of the nested array? What do you mean? No, yeah. I just put console log to see what it was because this was false and that was my bad. Yeah, so you just return the sentence at the end, so the function is going to return something. If you don't return something at the end of a function, the function automatically returns undefined. So just be careful of that. Like a lot of you guys yesterday had like your return outside of your function bracket, and that caused a lot of bugs. Like the errors you get for something like that are kind of unreadable. So just be sure to write cleaner code when you're working, because you'll have a better time. Any other questions on this? Should we do another one? Should we do another one from yesterday? Okay, cool. Yeah, so which one do you want to do? My slice. All right, let me just read the question. I don't even know what it is. My slice. So you just have to define. So you just have to basically build slice on your own, right? And it should return a copy of the original array. The copy should include all of the elements from the original array, starting at and including the starting index up to the include. Aha. Yes, you're just making slice. Cool. Cool. So let's go down over here, and we'll say, just comment this out. Okay. So we say, so we const my slice is equal to function. Oh, whoops. And my slice is going to take in three things. What are the three things that the regular slice method takes? What's the first argument? What is the first argument? It's the original. Yes. It's the start index. But this. Okay, sorry. So yeah, it's the first. It's start index of where you're starting. What's the second argument? Exactly, the number of elements you want to delete. But since we have to actually create slice on our own, this function has to take something else. And that is the original array that you need to do this on. But then the other two things will be start, and we'll call this one end. Cool. So we could say that first you have to be sure to check and make sure that the start index is there, right? You have to make sure that this start is defined, because if you remember, you can also just pass in just one thing into the regular slice function. So you have to be, and then it automatically starts at the 0th index. So to check for that, you just do a little if statement in the beginning. So if start is equal to undefined, start equals 0. Cool? So now, oh, but you could also pass in negative numbers. So this has to take an else if as well. So else if start is less than 0, right? So if it's less than 0, start will be equal to array dot length plus start. Does everybody get that? Because if it's a negative number, I didn't show you this, guys. I didn't show you guys this yesterday. That's my bad. But if it's a negative number, it's going to start from the back of the array, basically. So, like, if it's -1 and you have an array of, like, if you have an array of 3 things and it's -1, it's going to be 2. It's going to start at 2, right? Because it's 1 from the back. It's going to start at index 2, so it's going to be the last thing. If it's -2, it's going to be the second to last thing. And it kind of goes like that. That's how negative numbers work with slice. It's going to just look from the back.
You can just like draw that.
Yeah, sure. So if you do like equal like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And if you do like, and if you're doing array.slice, well, I'll do this. Wait, hold on. Slice of -2, 1, console log. Does that not work? Am I doing this wrong or something? Animals.slice, right? Of off an array. So why isn't this working? Does anybody see a problem with this? Huh? Wait, say that again? Oh, I gotta... Wait, what? Wait, no, I don't know what you guys are saying. The -1 should be at the end? Like that? Oh. No. Yeah? Wait, why are 2 things out of the array? Sorry? The end index is inclusive? Is not inclusive? Wait, what? I'm so confused right now. Slice is so weird. Yeah, so if you pass in... Okay, so if you pass in 1, it starts here. 1, 2, 3. Wait. I'm like so confused right now. Slice at 1, it just gets rid of the first one, right? So if you slice at 0, right. Why is that not changing the original array? Oh, I'm trying to do... Wait, is this slice or splice? Oh, this is my slice. Oh, dude, I was thinking this was supposed to be splice the entire time. That made absolutely no sense to me. That's my... Okay, so slice is completely different. Yeah, so slice actually takes... Yeah, so what is... Okay, sorry. So slice is where to start and where to stop, right? So you're starting at the first index, 0, right? If you pass in two negative things. I mean, a 1 and a negative 1. So you're starting at 0. I mean, you're starting at 1, index 1, right? Index 1 is 2. So that's why the slice starts at 2 here. But you're telling it to stop at negative 1, and negative 1 goes from the back. So negative 1 you can think of always as the last element in the array. Like if you pass this negative 2, it's even further from the back, where to start, right? So if you just pass this negative 1, you'll just get 5. You'll just get the last element, because you're telling it to start at the end of the array. Whereas if you pass in like negative 3, you're going to get 3 from the back, right? So 1, 2, 3, that's where you're starting. You could think of it a little bit like when you're accessing something and you're starting at 0 at the 0th index, but from the back, it's starting at 1, right? Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. It's more logical mathematically, right? Okay. We good on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my bad. I thought we were talking about splice for like 30 minutes. I had no idea what was going on. Right, so if we're saying if it's less than 0, start is going to equal the array.length plus the start. Because you're going to take the length of the entire array and basically subtract what will add the negative number to that array, and then you'll get the starting point from the back. Cool? So now that we're done setting start, we can go on and say if the end is equal to undefined. If you're not passing in an end is going to equal the array.length. Because if you don't pass anything into slice, it just slices off everything. And I mean, if you don't pass a second argument to slice, it just goes until the end of the array always. Cool? Does everyone get that? So, and if this, we need the same check here. So else if end is less than 0, end will equal array.length plus end. Same logic as before. Since it's a negative number, you have to tell it when to end from the back of the array.
Line 53.
Line 53, I have a typo? Thank you. So now, like you guys were telling me before, that I refused to listen to because I thought we were talking about splice. What does slice not do that slice does? It does not mutate the original array, right? It makes a copy and returns something like an entire copy, so it doesn't mutate the old data that you have. It's always there. So we're going to define, after we have this, we're going to say let array copy equal this. Empty array, right? And now we can loop through the actual array. So we could say let I equals 0. I is less than array. No, wait. No, whoa. We can't just start going into this. We have to start at wherever the start index is, and we have to end wherever the end index is, right? And then we're still going to do I plus plus here. So we're defining these variables start and end for this particular for loop. Because slice is always basically looping through an array and taking whatever the values you pass through and putting it into a copy of a new array. That's all slice is doing. So the main point of the start of this function is to define where that loop is starting and where that loop is ending. So now we could just do array copy.push array at I. So I'm not setting an element here because you could just do this. And then at the end, you can return return array copy. And this should work just fine. Like if you do my slice, so let example equal my slice of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll say start at index 1, and we'll go till index 3, and we'll console.log example. You get 2 and 3. Does everyone understand? Because the arguments of slice, the array, where you're starting, where you're stopping. So I'm telling it to stop. I'm telling it to start at 2, which is at index 1. And I'm telling it to stop at index 3, which is 3. So it's including these two things, and it's setting the example to a copy of that. Does everyone understand? Hmm?
Can you just explain the first two if statements?
Sure. So this is basically, these first two if statements are checking two things, right? Like these two if blocks right here, this if and else if, and this if and else if are checking two things. Like, okay, so let's, before I explain that, let's look at the actual thing of slice. Let's look at the actual, right? So we could console log example.slice, right? What does that do? Nothing. It just returns a copy of the array, because you're not telling it to start anywhere and you're not telling it to stop anywhere. So you can pass in nothing to slice. If you pass in only one thing, like 1, since I passed in 1, we're starting at index 1, so which is 2, and then we're putting everything after it until the end of the array into a copy of the new array, which is this thing. And if you pass in another thing, like 5, not 5, like 4, you're telling it to stop at index 4, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're only getting everything in between. Right? Yeah. So you have to account for, and like you could pass in negative things, and you have to account for the if you're passing something in, and if that's a negative number. So that's in these two separate things. That's what the if and the else is doing. It's saying, hey, is this being passed in? Because if nothing's being passed in, this parameter start is going to be set to undefined always. And if it is passed in and it's less than 0, we need to make that number not negative. We need to make it logical. So we make it positive by just adding that to the actual length of the array. That calculation will be the same thing as if it was a positive number. It'll bring you to the same point. Not like the same number, but, you know. Is everyone okay on that? I guess I could do one more quick if you guys want. Otherwise, we could start objects. No? Okay, I guess we'll start objects. Objects are really interesting. They're cool. They're kind of like arrays, but not really. Cool. So objects. In this lecture, we'll talk about what an object actually is and why they're useful, what the type of an object is. We're going to talk about accessing values and accessing values inside of an object, assigning them, adding them, changing them, and deleting them. We're going to talk about another operator, which is the in operator, and we're going to talk about for in loops, which is very similar to a for loop if the name's not giving it away. And we're going to talk about properties off of objects, particularly object.keys. The keys property is very nice. And then we will talk about nested arrays and nested objects inside objects. So, what is an object? An object is an unordered collection of key value pairs. Like arrays, objects store values, but instead of storing them at indexes, it's going to be storing them with store values in strings that are keys. They're called keys, so key value pairs. So arrays will always be ordered, right? It's always going to be zeroth index, first index, second index, whatever. So you always know what's what. Objects are not ordered, but they have a key. So if you know the key, you can always just look it up. Like say, I'll show you in a second, but like if you know the key, you can always know what the value is linked to that key. So take an example. So let my array is this, right? Value 1, value 2. And this is an object. The key is on the left side of the colon, and the value is on the right side. And it's surrounded by curly brackets instead of regular brackets, curly braces instead of brackets. So if you console log my array at 0, we're going to get value 1, right? And if you console log my object bracket key 1, you'll get value 1 as well. Does everyone see this? See why this is happening? To access something inside of an object, you can use bracket notation just like arrays. But instead of an index, you're going to be passing in a key. Objects are useful for many reasons. So an array is a good place to hold an ordered list, but it doesn't store any information about what the actual values are representing. So like in this example, you have an array called Pusheen, whatever, and it just has an array of a string, a number, and a string. As humans, you can look at this and say, okay, this is definitely the name, this is probably the age, and this is just a little description. But a computer has no idea what that means, right? So an object's string keys allows objects to store more information about the values within it. So you could say, you can define Pusheen as an object and say the name is Pusheen, the age is 7, and the color is this string, gray and tabby. So if you were to do Pusheen bracket name, you would get Pusheen. Pusheen bracket age, you would get 7. Does everyone get that? How can you see like a little bit the value of these keys now? It's other ways to describe the actual values. Whereas arrays are kind of just ordered lists, so it's a little better. This one's nice and short. The type of object is an object. Object is its own type. Arrays are also types of objects, technically. Just so you know. So to create an object, you're going to be creating using curly braces. And an object's keys are always strings, but you can actually not write the quotation marks. That's nice, right? You just do whatever you put here, like you can type whatever it is. This doesn't have to be defined, because JavaScript will say, hey, there's curly braces, this is inside curly braces, and there's a colon next to this thing, so this must be a string key. So it'll convert it to a string under the hood. And whatever comes after it will be the value. And everything is separated by commas, just like arrays. So to access a value inside of an object, you use bracket notation as well. And you could pass a string into the brackets that corresponds with the key in the object. Yeah, like I showed you guys. So if you do Pusheen of name, Pusheen of age, Pusheen of color, Pusheen, not a key in the object. So if you pass something in here that doesn't exist inside the actual object, you're going to get undefined. because it's looking for this key here. It sees nothing, so it's just going to return undefined. But if it sees name, it looks for name, it finds name, it's Pasheen. Age, 7. Just like before. Cool? Yeah. I'm sorry?
When you pass it in, do you always make a quotation?
If you're passing it in brackets, yeah.
Even if it doesn't have it.
If it what?
So like up there, like name and age. Then we have the quotation.
Yeah, so you don't need quotation marks when you're defining an object, like when you're writing, but when you're trying to like access a value, like giving a key, the key needs to be a string, for sure. Okay, so you can also pass, when you're trying to access something, you could also pass in a variable that's set to a string. Because really, when you're saying let key to check, when you're defining this variable, and you're setting it equal to name, primitive value, key to check, you could just think of being name. This no longer exists. This is just name. This is another word for this string. So if you do machine bracket key to check, you no longer need quotation marks. You just need to do whatever that value is you set, and it'll give you the same thing. And there's another example down there. You could actually do in a bracket the string COL plus the string OR to get color. Color will be grant F. I don't know why you would ever do that, but you know, you can do that if you really want to, you know? If you really want to do it. And now there's dot notation. Dot notation is something that I pretty much always use. So dot notation, you could just do Pasheen dot name. Then you don't need any quotes, and you just need a period. But there is something interesting about dot notation. So you might think Pasheen dot key to check is going to be Pasheen, right? You might think that, but it's actually going to return undefined. The reason for this is because when you're using brackets, you have to put things in quotations, right? So it knows that it's looking for a string key of whatever it is. So if you do like quotation of name, it's going to look for something called name in the object. But if you do bracket notation of a value, like key to check like we did before, this is going to look, okay, what is key to check actually equal to? And that's going to be a string name, which has quotations. The dot notation, if you just use the period, this is basically just saying, okay, look for something that's called color in here, a string called color, like a key color. This is saying, look for a string called key to check. There's nothing called key to check in here. So it returns undefined. Dot notation is definitely more quick when you're writing quickly, just to access things in an array. But definitely be aware that there has to be anything that comes after the dot, that key has to actually exist inside the object, unless you're going to get undefined. Is anybody confused by this? Nobody? You guys good on this? Okay. Adding a key value pair is super easy. You could do this with either bracket notation or dot notation. So let's say you have the same thing, Pasheen the cat, name, whatever. And let's say you do Pasheen at sister, and then you just set it equal to Stormy. And you do Pasheen dot brother and set it equal to Pip. That's the actual object. Those things are just added onto the object. So if you pass it in brackets as a string or just dot brother, it looks for that. It looks for whatever it is in here. But since you're setting an equal operator, it's just a single equal sign. The equal operator will then set whatever that value is, or whatever that value is, to this value. And if there is nothing in there, it just adds it to the object. So now you can see like how objects could be useful for storing lots of data. Changing a value is the same thing. Dot notation or bracket notation. So Pasheen at age is now equal to 8, and then Pasheen dot age plus plus, right? So the age is 9. You guys know that plus plus is shorthand for saying machine.age is equal to machine.age plus 1, right? So we're accessing machine at age, and we're reassigning 7 to be 8, and then we're adding 1 to whatever that is in the next line. So that's why when you console log machine.age, you get 9. Is anyone confused? It's okay. Like, you can ask a question. Like, we're going a little fast, so just let me know if you guys want me to go back to something that you didn't understand. Okay. So there's also this other thing that you could do with objects, and that's deleting things out of the object with the delete word. You literally just write delete, space, and then whatever the name of the object is, and then accessing that value. So if you do delete machine at age, and you could do this with either bracket or dot notation. Now you just have a name. So you just do delete space machine at age, delete space machine dot color. That'll look for this and delete the entire thing. It'll delete the entire thing if you do that. Okay, before we talk about the in operator, are there any questions about bracket notation or dot notation or adding things to objects, replacing them, anything? Of the actual variable?
Yeah.
Right, so when you set something to a variable, right? When you set something to a variable, that name, whatever, like you say, like let example equal a string, whatever, right? That word example, the computer is not going to read example. It's going to read whatever it says. It's going to read the string, right? So when you're using bracket notation, you have to pass whatever you're in as a string, because that's what object keys are actually strings. So dot notation takes whatever is after the dot, whatever that is, converts that to a string. It doesn't look past it if it's a variable. It just says whatever is after this dot, that is the key I'm looking for. That actual sentence that you're writing is the key I'm looking for. So it's going to look for a key, whatever that is inside. You get that? Anyone else? Okay. Okay, so the in operator, you can use this to check if a key is in the object, right? So if before you are, because like if you try to access something that isn't in an object, you're going to get undefined, right? So if you want to check and see, hey, is this in this object? I don't want to get undefined. Hey, let me just do name in machine, and this is going to return true or false. So as you see, it's looking for key, not value. So it's looking for, so you say name in machine, a string, space, in space, the object. String, sadness, space, in space, the object, right? And it returns a boolean. True or false. If it's inside there or if it's not. It's pretty straightforward, right? Is that in that? Yes or no? It's that simple. But now, I mean, like, no one really ever just does things like that. The in operator is actually used for for-in loops. So you use a for-in loop to loop all the way through all the keys of an object. So think of for-in loops as a for loop for objects. So like, you don't use a regular for loop for objects because you only really use them for arrays or some other kind of computation, because arrays are ordered, so you know that it's going to hit everything in its order. Whereas, like, you just can't do that, honestly. You just can't do it. So you say for let key in machine. So think of key as I. Think of key as I in for. So you're saying let key. This key is something new, something you're making for the for inside of machine. So for every key inside of machine, right? You're going to console log machine's key is machine key. That sounds really weird saying a lot. So it loops through it, and it says machines that key, and that key at this point in time was equal to name. And since it's still in that same loop, that key you can access the value. You can access the value at that key too. So you can see machine's name is machine, machine's age is 7, machine's color is gray tab. Do you guys understand how this is happening? I understand this is new, but think of this as a way to loop through an object and get all the keys and the values, to get all the values in an object. So it's saying, like, a for loop is more simple to grasp what's going on because you know there is something called I, and you know it's being added by 1 every time, or you could set that to whatever you want. You know it's incrementing every time, so you know what's coming next in the array. This is just saying it's getting all the keys in the object, and it's going through each key, basically. Every single key. So you can access that key, like here, and you can access that value, like here. Like this foreign loop isn't doing anything, we're just console logging some nonsense sentence. But for each thing, as you can see, it goes through everything inside the object. And you have the key and the value. The key and the value. It's not that bad. It's pretty. This is very useful, looping, because if you need to loop through an object, this is what you're going to do. Okay? What's next? Use the for and loop to loop through all the keys in it. Yeah, just. Okay. So this is the difference that we were just talking about with dot notation. Everything is undefined, right? So like I said before, the for and loop is looping through all the keys, right? So you have access to all these keys inside machine. But if you want the value, you need to pass in what that key is. And since that key is set to a variable called key, it's actually looking for a key inside machine that's called key, not whatever key is represented. It's actually looking for something called key every single time you're looping. So everything is undefined. So be sure, if you're using a foreign loop, to use bracket notation and not dot notation. You guys are good in understanding why you shouldn't be doing this inside a foreign loop, right? Like you understand why this is showing up as undefined every time and shouldn't be used inside a foreign loop, right? Because a foreign loop, the key is always going to be set to a variable. Like it's let key, you could call that let whatever, let my key, let this key, that key, whatever. But you can't use dot notation with this key, that key, my key, key, because it's not representing what's actually the key inside the array. You need to have this in brackets, or else you'll get undefined. Is everyone good on that, on the in operator on foreign loops? Okay, cool. So now, like there's a global object of array, like you guys did array.isArray, right? Capital array.isArray. It's the same thing with objects. Objects have properties too. And one of those properties is dot keys. So you do capital O for object, and then you say dot keys, and it just returns an array of all the keys. Like you can have an array of every key if you want. So like here, take the same object we've been working with, and we're going to console object.keys, and that argument is an object. And it returns an array of all the keys. It's very simple. Object.keys, pass it to an object, you get an array of all the keys in that object. Good? And then let me just show you. So objects can also hold arrays. So this is an object, and colors is now an array with gray comma tab. Makes sense, right? It can hold strings and numbers. It can hold booleans. It could also even hold arrays. It could also hold other objects. So it can keep going down and down and down and down. And that's how you access, like, gray and tab. You do pusheen, dot, or bracket colors. And once you have that, that translates into this array, right? And then you do at 0, at 1 for the indexes of that array. Just like you access things in nested arrays. But objects, you can also use dot notations to access the keys. So it's that simple. But you can't use dot notation here to access these things, because this is an array, this isn't an object. So you have to use bracket notation and pass the index. Yeah.
An array or an object?
Yes. You can have an array of objects. See, objects and arrays are like kind of similar, because technically arrays are objects, but they're like a little different, yeah? So arrays at each index can have whatever kind of data type you want. You could have undefined, null, boolean, number, string, object, and another array. For sure. Yeah, so here's an example of it holding another object. So now machine has a siblings key, and that value to siblings is another object. With keys sister and brother, Stormy and Pip, right? Is this readable to everybody? At name, the key name, we have machine, like always. At the H key, we have 7, like always. And at the siblings key, we have another object with these marked with these 2 curly braces. And inside there, we have 2 keys, sister to Stormy, brother and Pip. You guys get that? Cool. You see what just happened? You do pusheen dot siblings dot sister. And you actually get Stormy that way. So you can do dot, 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 dot as long as they're objects and the keys exist. This isn't that bad, right? Like, it's okay. Objects are very useful because, it's easy to add things in, like push. Like, that's another thing about arrays. Like, arrays, you gotta push and you gotta pop and you gotta shift and unshift. It's only at the front and the back, and then you gotta do splice to add things in the middle, and that's annoying. Like this, you do dot this, and it's in the array with whatever you set it to. It's nice, it's easy, it's simple. It's just not ordered, so it's not used for everything with objects. So a recap, we went over all this stuff. What an object is, why it's useful, what the type is, how to access, add, change, delete, what the in operator is, for loops, object.keys, and nested arrays and objects. Are there any questions about any of these things that you want me to go over? Yeah. Sure. Let me show you an example. So let's say let obj is an object, right? It's going to be equal to this. Well, I'll call this like example. No, I'm going to call this cities, right? And I'm going to say New York, City, right? And I'll do Illinois, and I'll say Chicago. And then I'll say Montana, and I'll say Helena. So, you see, this is an object of cities. I mean, an object called cities. This is just one object called cities, and it has 3 keys, which is New York, Illinois, and Montana, right? So, if I were to do cities, so if I was to say, let example equal equal to New York, and for the sake of argument, I'll do this too. And I was to do console.log cities dot example. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Cool. So if I was to do this, it's undefined, right? If I was to write example here, it's hello. Do you understand? When you're using dot, it doesn't matter. It doesn't it's not taking into account what example actually is. It's not taking into account what this actually is. It doesn't care about this. It's just saying, okay, in the object cities, where is the key example? That's all it cares about. Where is that key? It doesn't matter. So you could say, so at example, that you get New York City. That's what the dot is doing. It's ignoring the actual, it's ignoring variables. If you have a variable called example, because if you wrap this around in quotes, you get hello again. Because now that it's in quotes and you're using bracket notation, it's looking for the string example. Because you can think of this as being in quotes as well, right? Because these are all really strings. You just don't have to write the quotations when you're defining objects, because it's annoying. You don't have to do that. But, so this is looking for a string literal called example. It's literally a string. It's just a string, and it's looking for that key. But since there's no quotation marks, JavaScript doesn't know that this is a string. It might think it's undefined if this wasn't here, right? It'll say that's undefined. It'll just throw a crazy error. But since it is defined, it looks and sees what it's equal to, and since it's equal to the string New York, it looks inside here for a New York key. Whereas if you use the dot, that's the key about dot notation. It's going to look for an actual key inside the object of whatever is following the dot, regardless of variables. Regardless. Is everyone clear on that now? Are you good on that? Yes? Is everyone good on that? Does anyone want me to show them anything else? Oh yeah, let me just shrink it down. Okay, so we're good? You guys want to take a break and then go into the workshops? In 5 minutes? 10 minutes? I don't know. Whatever you guys want. 5 minutes? We'll make it 7 minutes.